Welcome to my technical channel. My name is Sasha, and today we will discuss work immigration and my experience with Denmark, why I get to Denmark, how I get there, why I left, and overall experience, work-related experience with Denmark. I will not discuss in this video great, amazing opportunities what Denmark have and the quality of life. And I really like the Denmark and really like the Copenhagen. I really like the people, and I will try to keep this video mostly strict to the technical stuff, what I really like about the technicality of the life there and what I don't really like about that. And this video will be quite challenging for me to make because I have a lot of background emotions about everything what happens with me there, and I'm also still kind of in love with the country, and I'm thinking about any type of opportunities how I can get back to Denmark. And at the moment I'm in Serbia, and it's quite a huge contrast in quality of life between both of the countries, as you can understand. But nevertheless, this video about the work immigration, me as engineer in the microelectronics and highly great professional in the field with more than 15 years of experience across the Europe and originally from Russia. And I think if you're not from EU, my experience will be quite helpful, and what I will share will also make your decisions more correct, and you will know what to actually expect from Denmark. This video will be quite long, I think, and what I will try to do, I will try to keep it compact and short, and in the same time more or less informative. Back in time I was living in Germany, and I was living in Munich, and it was kind of a pre-COVID time, and also before that I was living around 6 years in Germany, and I already totally understand that Germany is not my country and I cannot really work there. I don't really like the people, I don't really like the culture, I don't really like the bureaucracy and the country and the policy, and overall experience there in Germany was pure suffering. So also overall as an immigrant there, it's quite long and stupid story, and I think it's kind of a point for additional video. And based on that background, I start to search for different opportunities. I was searching around the countries in the Europe because it's quite easy to relocate for me with the family around the Europe. And I think at some point I was visiting the Copenhagen. I never thought about Denmark as a country where I want to live. And in my case, it was basically the bench test. So I sit in this town in Copenhagen, I think like, yeah, okay, I actually want to live here. And from that, I think I visited as a tourist Copenhagen maybe 3 times or 4 times, and I already know that, okay, if I have opportunity to work there or live there or have a visa there, it will be quite amazing. And after the COVID times, I think I start specifically search for the work in Copenhagen, and for my understanding it was not a lot of opportunities there, and especially because I am engineer in the microelectronics, and the Denmark is more about the biomedical stuff and drugs and the different types of developments of the things there. So I had experience with the clean room, and I also have quite a lot of experience with the printed electronics, different types of knowledge in material science, and I was selected as a person who actually have a mixed backgrounds. And I start searching for the positions, and I found the position which I was curious about in the company Demant or Oticon. So this is one of the biggest manufacturers of the hearing aids, and this company made quite a huge variety of the hearing aids, and it's an umbrella corporation. It makes Oticon, Philips, Bernafon, and different types of brands of hearing aids, and it's quite popular in Europe. I think it's less popular outside of the Europe because it's more premium sector of the hearing aids, but nevertheless, what was important for me at that time, it was important to have a company which making real products. So I want to have experience of the manufacturing. I want to have experience of translation of the basically your ideas more to the physical stuff, participate in the new product introduction cycle, and also have a a lot of mixed experiences from the fields which I'm not really familiar. So for example, in this case, I was dropped in the field of SMD and basically assembly of the flexible circuit boards on a mass scale, and also production and different types of communication with the people, and production cycle of the hearing aids and how the technology works, how the assembly works. And I worked in the group of the core team development. So basically this is a small group, and I still really like the people which I work with in our small group. And I really like my boss, Soren. He was really great man and still are, and we're still in a contact, and I really appreciate how he handled all of the hiring process, all of the daily day life of the team itself, and also my personal life. So it was quite nice experience, and I think it's a great example of the difference actually between the Germany and between the Denmark, because in Germany it's quite hostile and the people distanced all the time, and for my personal opinion, the Danish people, it's quite close to my mentality and how it works. They more involved emotionally with the processes around the people. They more involved in a conversational style, and it's just in general more human interaction on the level of people. And downside of that, that it took a lot of time to find a work in Denmark. And for me, back in the day, it was not really a red flag of anyhow, because I was searching for the positions, and in 2021, 2022, it was majority of the position was opened. It was not a huge problem for me to find the work, and basically I had a lot of opportunities and participated in a lot of interviews. I also went for the different countries. I went for the Sweden, for example, and almost took a position there, and in the Netherlands, and it was quite nice period of time when you can have different types of positions, and you can easily find work, so without any problems. But after 3 years in Denmark, things change, as you probably know and see what's happening at the moment on the market as engineers or as a technical person. And at the moment, it's almost impossible to find work. So I was not thinking about that. I was thinking okay, maybe I'm just taking the more desirable positions, and if I need some kind of a position to stay in Denmark, it will be not a problem. But overall, as you probably know, in Europe, communication with the company and hiring process can take up to 1 year. So basically, if company make 5 interviews or something like this, and it falls down to the, for example, summer breaks or on a Christmas time, you can get stuck. So you can get up to 3 months of interviewing, and you can get 2-3 more months just waiting until all the people and all the cocks, especially in a corporate world, will turn and you will finally sign the contract. Additionally, if we're talking about the rest of the Europe, the process of the visas and arranging of the visas also can take up to 3 months. So basically your hiring process in Europe nowadays, also in 2026, quite horrible in terms of the migration policies, just because you need to wait up to 1 year and kind of do something. Meanwhile, process is rolling up and you kind of just waiting for the next position up to 1 year. So you kind of have automatic gap year doing something, which is interesting for me as a Russian person, because we get used to find the work basically in 1 day, and you start on the next day and you have one interview, and if it's a success, it's a success and you start working. Usually this is how it works in my mind, and before I was immigrating, I never searched for the work. Basically, I was the guy who everybody wants to get, and usually people just call me and say, okay, you have no work. Do you want to work with us? And this was how it's working. And overall experience of the hiring in the company Demant back in the day, it was quite nice. I can actually say that from my director of the factory back in the day, she was just amazing person. She was crazy supportive. She had a great conversation also with me, because at the moment the war started with the Ukraine, and we have like Ukrainian colleagues. It was quite conversational and polite and human interaction. And also they paid for the tickets from Munich to Copenhagen to visit basically the site. On the second interview, I had quite great interviews. I think they showed the factory, asked the question, I asked the questions, how it works. I look on where it's located, how is the commute, if I'm willing to do that, and also overall experience was quite nice. And downside, I think, turn on when the corporation hits on, when the not local members of the factory started turning on. So basically, I was pushing the relocation package, and it was kind of a presented to me as advantage. And now I understand that all the relocation packages from all the corporations and the companies is, I don't know, not worth it at least. And just because the companies, it's a subcontractor usually, and they don't really care. They take like few thousand euros from the company and they do nothing with you. So they make a strange calls with you. They trying to arrange some kind of a documents with you. But in general, in Denmark, just if you have options to this kind of a relocation package, forget about that and ask about the, starting money from the company. For them, it will be exactly the same sum, but you will definitely spend it much better. And we will discuss it a little bit later why. And first of all, I want to say that it's a several problems with the relocation in Denmark. So the first problem, what I want to discuss is not visas, it's not the documents itself, it's actually renting. You need to understand that the Denmark at the moment and back in the day, and now it's even getting worse than what I experienced. And I think in the next years it will be much more horrible than it's even now. And the main problem is how to rent the apartment. You need to understand that this country is small. And in general, you can only live more or less in the new buildings. And all of these new buildings, they built by the corporation. So they built by different types of corporations, and also they managed by the companies. So you more or less don't really have any type of human interaction and human contact, despite, for example, how it's managed in Germany. And in Germany, usually it's like old guy putting the advertising in a newspaper, paper one, and also it's a strange interactions. They have different types of questionnaires and questions for the tenants and things like that. Here, more or less, it works a little bit different. So first of all, what I want to say that apartments in Copenhagen and in the surrounding areas almost have an identical price, which is just crazy. So if we're talking about the Danish kronas, back when I was searching the apartment, the starting price for the small apartment of like 40-50 square meters for basically one bedroom and one main room for two person was around 10 to 12,000 kronas outside the city, basically like 1 hour drive from the city. And in the end of the city, in the corners of the city, it was around the 12 to 13,000 kronas. And you need to understand also that small apartments in Denmark, basically one room apartment or studio apartments, they gone immediately, so you cannot really find these apartments, and usually they don't build this type of apartments just because most of the young people, I think, especially immigrants in Denmark, they don't live alone, they live with co-tenants or some kind of friends, or live as a couple or with the kids and so on. So basically it's no market for small apartments because it's only for students, and for students it's completely different rules. And let's discuss the main problem. And this is a problem also related to the work relocation to Denmark. So in Germany, I think the most of the time you need to pay for 1 month of the rent and 1 or 2 months of the deposit. And that's it. In Denmark, it's completely different. First of all, let's calculate. I actually paid for the apartment around 14,500 kronas. roughly, I think it's around 2,000 euros, if I'm not mistaken. I will put the number somewhere here. And you need to pay for the first month, you need to pay for the 3 months deposit, and you need to pay for the last month upfront. And the last month you need to move out basically 15 days before end of the month, so in the mid-month. So you need to understand that when you move in Denmark upfront, you need to put around 10,000 euros to just get in the apartment, which is empty. And these apartments you will get only kitchen and bathroom, and that's it. You will have nothing inside. So keep it in mind that with the tickets, with the relocation, with the buying simplest furniture in IKEA, you will spend around 15,000 euros to just get started. And this is a basically level of the craziness of the Copenhagen at the moment. And I cannot really say that these apartments, they made from the high quality furniture, and for example doors in these apartments literally made from cardboard, and it's just white plain apartment. And if you compare quality, for example, simplest apartment in Germany have much higher quality than this new building apartments in the Copenhagen. And also when you get the contract and when you apply for the visa, you also need to sign the contract for the apartment. So basically this is initial tax for moving in Denmark. And it means that if you need to find the apartment, you need to pay this money up front, and you also need to kind of move in this apartment to get at least the box, letter box. And because all of the documents will arrive in this letter box, and it's also mandatory to have a constant address in Denmark to have a visa. So for visas, it's quite easy. I was quite surprised that everything is digital after Germany especially. So you don't really have any problems to getting in Denmark. I think if you lived even as Russian immigrant in Europe, at least back in the day in 2022, if I'm not mistaken, when I was relocating, everything is digital, and I was on a fast track visa. So it's basically that the company have special type of order because it's a big corporation, and most of the corporations in Denmark are big and they hire a lot of people, and it gets in a fast track. And only one thing what you need to do, that you need to arrive in Copenhagen, go in the visa center which called Siri, and there you need to put your fingerprints. And on the next day, when I arrived there, I put the fingerprints, and then basically on the next day my visa was released and I can live in Denmark. So it was quite fast. And for my surprising, now after basically 4 years, I don't even remember which documents I was collecting for the Denmark, which for immigrants sounds crazy. I think it was some documents in English, like a diploma in English, or diploma in English, a passport, I think, and current visa and stuff like that. So nothing special. And I already had these documents for Germany, and I don't really had any problems with applying for the new kind of a fast track visa in Denmark with my current documents in Germany. So it was quite easy transition without any problems, and I received everything. And also in comparison to the Germany, it's quite fast to get the documents, and also it's not a lot of documents. So you have a CPR number, which is like unique number of the citizen, and you have a yellow card, which is your medical card and library card and altogether whatever card. And you also have your ID, and ID have connection to your workplace from the fast track visa. And overall experience is expensive. It's quite nice, probably if you not think about it. And by the entrance fee to the country, it's also quite expensive if your company doesn't really pay for the visas itself, because visas itself I think also cost around 300 euros if I'm not mistaken. It was quite expensive, but I was not paying for that, so I don't really remember. You can check it officially on the website. It's quite open information, and this is also what I really like about the bureaucracy in Denmark. Denmark. You can read all the manuals, you can read everything on the website, and it kind of how it works, and they strict to these rules, and it's public, it's in English, and really good in the communication, and you have zero problems with the communicating with the officials there. Everything is in English, so you have zero problems. It's not like in Germany, and I really like that experience back in the day. And now let's discuss second important topic. So you need to be a highly educated professional, and you have limitations on visas. So for example, you have the ability to work only on one work, and you cannot really get any sources of income. You can get additional type of sources of income if you have this type of visa, but you need a special register for that, and you can only take the income basically making consulting connected to your work. So this is quite limiting. So you cannot really work as a food delivery guy on the evenings, for example, if you have not enough money, or doing something what I'm doing on the side. So basically make a photography equipment and also be related to the photography itself and make some kind of a small amount of money on the side. So it's really illegal to do that in Denmark with this type of visa. But this is not a critical part. The critical part, that's your spouse, or so basically your wife or husband, if they don't really have the initial work and they connected to your visa, they more or less screwed. And the main answer there is that it's impossible to find any type of work in Denmark. When I was moving in Denmark, I was thinking that if you're locally there, you can go on an interview and it will be quite nice and fast and easy to find the work there and find the position there. But unfortunately, this is not the case, and I have so many examples that people really like struggle by years and cannot find even simpler work, like working in a supermarket or working in a coffee place or working in a merchandiser somewhere. So it's almost impossible to find any type of work. And it's not only because you kind of have this type of visa, but it's also because everybody there, for some reason, if you are not in the high educated kind of a class of work, everybody asking about the native Danish. And native Danish, as you understand, it's basically Danish person. And most of these work positions, they occupy it in the two groups. So it's only local, for example, students and Danish students. And the second option is the people from the European Union who even don't really live there. So they have a kind of a work for 1 year there, and they have an option to have this kind of a work visa and pay less taxes, or even make a gray schemes and don't pay taxes at all. So this is more or less the idea. And in the same time, usually, at least in my case, your wife or your husband is a highly educated professional. And it's not enough workplaces in Denmark for highly educated professionals. Basically, there's none. So you have the strange and really crazy kind of a situation that you are a professional and you sitting in a highly educated, great looking country, you trying to apply everywhere and you get rejected from everywhere. And you know the English language, you even try to start to learn Danish, you pass exams on Danish, but also in the same time, nobody want to work with you just because it's not enough positions. And on some positions, it's only internship. And so basically internship, you understand that nobody pay for that. And most of the Danish people and also people in Denmark, they know that, okay, you have no choice and you need some kind of experience at work, and they don't really want to pay for you. And they don't really want to pay taxes, and also basically they're getting work for free. And trust me, it's a huge line of people who want to work for free in Denmark because they're just getting crazy and they have nothing to do at home. Next thing what I want to discuss is actually banking system. And as you probably understand, that Denmark is a European Union, but in the same time it's a different currency and it's not really European Union, and it's kind of a gray zone. And it's the same thing with the banking. As I said before, that you actually need to apply for the banking, and in Germany it also was horrible, and I think in all European countries get the bank account is quite terrible experience. I was experiencing the N26 in Germany, and it was quite nice digital bank, and I still think it's one of the kind of a greatest what you have there, and Revolut also one of the best banks and digital ones. But you have almost zero options in the Denmark to have a great bank. You have only one digital bank, and it was, I think, opened when I was relocating to Denmark, and I was kind of in the beginning users of the Lunar. So it's an online bank. I cannot really say it's a great bank and great app. It's quite modern, but I cannot really say it's much better than the rest of the things. And shifting from N26 to Lunar was quite a bad experience. Only one advantage of this bank was that it provides you a card around 2 weeks time, and it quite fast in comparison to the rest of the banks. And the rest of the banks can basically decline your application without any notice that because you have a Russian passport, or if you cannot confirm that you have the money and many transactions on a different bank account. So if you are kind of a not trusted person, they can basically decline your application. And in general, the normal classic Danish banks, they are terrible. I know a lot of terrible stories how they work, but I think it's not the unique feature for the Denmark. I think around across the Europe, it's the same horrible experience like banks in Germany, like Sparkasse and all of these terrible entities. They just should burn in hell, basically. This is terrible banks. And in principle, you usually will take up to 3 months to get the classical normal bank account without advantages. So in my case, I said no, thank you, I don't want to go with this route, and I selected the Lunar Bank and get the bank account. It was quite nice and fast. I get the card, I have Apple Pay, I have all the bells and whistles, and it was quite nice for me. And I think all of my co-workers was surprised that I can get the bank account so fast, and it's not quite usual. And I also spoken with a relocation person in the company side, and she said it's usually take up 3 months. And by the law in the Denmark, if you're relocating, they can pay on a different bank account, for example European one, up to 3 months legally while you're waiting for your bank account. And after 3 months, it will be a huge problem to actually get your salary. So if you have a delays in the bank accounts and you cannot really take the local bank account for some reason, you will be in a big trouble because you cannot really get the salary, and it will be quite huge problem with the taxes also. So you need to keep it in mind that it's, as always, as all of the countries in Europe, it's not really pleasant experience. And also Lunar Bank have quite a low limits to withdrawing cash, to making transactions, and so on and so forth. And it's a little bit over controlled. And for example, for me, it was not a problem, but for my wife, for example, it was a quite huge problem to get account. She needed to confirm the transactions on the previous bank accounts and stuff like that. So they was asking too much questions actually from the bank point of view, and especially from the person who bringing a lot of money for your bank. And I think this type of conversation between the bank and the person who actually bringing money to the bank, it's a little bit strange. And from here, I think the whole problem with the Denmark begins, because for my experience, most of the time people own your money. So for example, your bank is owning your money, but for some reason you still thinking that actually you owning something to the bank and owning kind of a money, and they kind of lock your money, and you really have no rights to do whatever you want with your money. And they basically blocking all of the normal legal procedures for you using this bank, which is strange for me, and I still think this kind of a system propagates across the Denmark itself. Next step, let's discuss the work situation. And I think from the beginning, the first year of working in Demand was quite nice. I think it was quite good period of time, and after 1 year, I think the crisis begins, and economical crisis begins, and the change of the management begins. And honestly, I was kind of hired in completely different company with a completely different scopes than I was end up in, and I was hired as the core team developer engineer, basically senior process engineer, on the position of the creating new system and package in the hearing aids. And I was crazy motivated at the time to have opportunity to work on a real deal products which people use and will use for next 10 years. And I still really proud that I was participating in a delivery and basically creating some of the products on the market, and you can buy them in a shop. And I saw these products, I have my hands on these products, I solve some of the technical issues and technical problems with these products, and I kind of glad that I participated in that. But nevertheless, over 1 year, I think, we had the change in management. We have a new director, and this new director, actually the Polish guy. And for me, it's still strange that the Denmark, for some reason, have a high connection to the Poland, not for Germany as a closest country, but for Poland. And most of the companies which I have interviewed in Denmark, they have a Polish HRs, which is sitting in Poland, or they have a manufacturing site in Poland, or they also have IT infrastructure outside the Denmark, and it's basically outsourced where in Poland. And I was for a long period of time not really understanding the connection, and now I understand the connection because it's the cheapest country which is close by to Denmark, and you can just cross on the car in basically 5 hours from the Mersin to the Copenhagen, and it's quite close place. And this is why low cost of the life and people exploited basically by Danish people, and this is why involvement became more or less common there. And what I can say that this mixture is quite interesting and quite dangerous. And I think overall experience when you work with a normal non-corporate Danish boss and the Danish people around you, and you have a conversations, they also quite blend. I know that I'm a professional which is not really comfortable. I have a lot of kind of a technical conflicts with the people. I try to challenge norms. I try to challenge the stuff, and this is basically most of the time give a greater rewards for the company, pushing the new technologies and create a great innovations, and it create a critical points. And most of the time, people, especially in Germany, for example, they get stuck with that, and they cannot really participate in a good normal technical conversation. They try to stick with the old tools and old technologies, and most of the time when you work with the old people, it creates a lot of problems. I don't really think that it was a huge problems with the Danish people, but also in the same time it was quite a problem with the Polish people. And I think you never actually thought of this, but let's discuss the racism and let's discuss the overall experience in Denmark, because I think for people who lived in the different countries, and I think for people who actually worked in the different countries, I think this level of the base level of racism is fine, because everybody understands that if you live in your country and you have some kind of a foreigner, even if he's educated, even if everything is like proved and things like that, and he can work, and he actually work not on his own language in your country and have a higher degree of education and speciality, doesn't matter. You think that this guy is like, okay, he's like stupid, or I don't like him, he is strange, he is different, and so on and so forth. And I think this kind of a basic level of racism is fine. So it happens, it's just in human nature. You're different, and because you're different, I don't really like you. And sometimes for people it takes few conversations, few handshakes, or few projects finished together to basically know you that you're just really good guy, and you have a conversation, you just from the different country, and you have zero problems after all. And I think a really great example of that, if you go on a trip with your colleagues, or if you go to a factory acceptance test to test the machines or something, you really build a great connection with the people, and especially if you solve the technical stuff and not try to push any type of common management things on people. And I think this is a quite great example. And with the current political situation, you actually have quite anti-Russian weather in Poland. And I think most of the Polish people, they thinking that they are Europe for some reason, and they're a little bit different. No offense for the Polish people, I don't really care, but in general, this overall kind of a propaganda sinks inside the heads of the people, and they thinking that the Russian people is like, I don't know, aggressive and trying to do something and whatever, and they anti Poland or anti Europe, and they don't really like how the thing's going, and everything is amazing and beautiful especially in Poland. So I heard it multiple times. I have some kind of a conflicts with the Polish people based on that, and you can actually feel it in the air that this kind of a conversations floating around. And we have almost 50% of the people from Poland on a factory. And it was also interesting that the people who actually work on the factory and they from Poland, they was quite nice. I have a really great conversations with them. Operators on the tools, we have some jokes, and I can barely understand what they're speaking about, but like we can find the common language, and they was really nice, right? Really nice people. But in the same time, incorporated people from Poland, for example, HRs who actually grasp, and climb the ladder of corporate evil from Poland up to the Denmark and get the position in Denmark. These people quite horrible. And I honestly think that this is the worst type of kind of relocations and worst type of mobility, and you need to be really careful with these people and what they think, because they usually never speak truth, and they usually have this kind of a basic racist level behavior. And at least in my experience, so as I said, I have nothing against the Polish people, it's just my experience, what I was feeling from the people from Poland, and never from the people from Denmark or other countries, because we have a multi-language, multicultural also team, and I don't really have this experience before. And also before this work, I have zero experience with the Polish people. I never was in Poland. I never was even speaking with the Polish people. So for me, it was a quite surprise to have this kind of aggressive behavior in my direction. So this is also quite interesting that in some countries, for example, in Germany, you have a racism that, okay, you don't speak German, you don't really talk German, like, okay, speak German, it's a Germany, and so on and so forth, and you feel like a foreigner, and the Germans don't really like any type of foreigners. But in general, in Copenhagen, I think for most of the educated, at least people, the racism for Danish doesn't really exist. They don't really understand what is all about this thing. They don't really accept this kind of a terms. They don't really kind of feel it. I think it's just because it's a small country and there's a small amount of people, and they really curious about different cultures. And I think they spend most of the time in the youth traveling around the countries and living abroad. In like Japan, for example, my boss was living in Japan for a long period of time and have a great stories about that, and they curious about different cultures. And this is also what I really like about Danish people, that they curious and ask the bland questions, especially they ask the questions which I usually feel uncomfortable, because I don't want to pour my dark experience from Russia on top of their heads, but they persistent, and sometimes I need to do that, and they feel sorry for me most of the time, and I have this kind of strange cooperation in terms of like, okay, I'm sharing and don't really want to overshare, but they kind of ask again and again, and it's like okay, this is how it works, this is how it was, this is how my parents live, this is how I lived in this country, or this is why this situation at the moment happening, and stuff like that. And it's like a lot of things, they open up the eyes, and the Danish people really naive, and they really kind of open-minded, and this is what I really like about the working in a Danish company and the kind of Danish environment. one more strange thing about the work processes, and in Denmark it's a work weeks. I think it's not really popular around the world, but maybe in some financial circles it's popular, but in Denmark is just on the next level. Everything in Denmark, I think it's also my philosophy about the migration and also different types of cultures, because for example, in Russia, like you make a conversation and you will say like, okay, you will have a delivery on that date and on that time. And in Germany, for example, maybe you will have a delivery on the Friday and this date. But in Denmark, you will get the delivery on week 22, for example, and you never know where, you never know which day, and usually you even don't know what is a week 22. And after living for 3 years in Denmark, I still don't really understand what is a week 22 means and what dates these weeks are. And just this is, for me, it was so strange, and most of the time it doesn't really make any sense, because people, for example, using the week 10.2, so it's Tuesday of week 10. In my case, like I think like, okay, can you put the just dates? Maybe it will be much simpler for everyone to understand what's happening. But in work scenarios is fine, but they also pushing that in the day-to-day conversations. And basically, if you want to visit your friends, they will say, okay, let's visit on week 8. It's like, let's meet up on this week and some range. And it can be really, really confusing and strange. And this is just a small, interesting feature. And for me, it's the same as, you know, inches. It doesn't make sense, this kind of a non-metric system type of thing, which is just funny for any type of foreigner. And I think it speaks a lot about the culture and tempo of living in Copenhagen. And I will stop here a little bit more, just because I can say that this is one of the easiest work-life balance countries, and not just because that everybody's not overworking, people working hard, and most of the time they also have overtimes, and on some positions you just also stay for quite a long time. And I was personally never counting the time I go home where the work is done, and I really hate this type of a thing that you need to be strict from 9 to 5 and you drop the pen like Germans do and just went home. For me, especially working in the clean room, it was basically not logical, because I have a split and I need to make lunch. And if I work straight like 8 hours, I cannot really finish the process. So I have no point to start second processing after lunch, because it will take more than 5 hours and you cannot finish it in the same day, and you cannot clean up after you. So for me, it was quite easy to make the 10-hour work day or even more, and not skipping the lunch, but make it short and finish the work for 2 days or even 3 days in one day, just because you have a batching of the process and you can finish everything in one day. You don't need a re-clean, reapply, remount, and things like that. So for me, it was quite logical. And in Denmark, I think it's more or less the same, but in the same time, you have the understanding of the people that people have kids, people have different types of hobbies, people have sport. And I think also in Denmark, most of the people, even with the, you know, age up to 60 plus and like 70 plus even, where they have the active sport behavior. They most of the time at least drive the bike at work, and for them it's quite common. Any type of weather is also fine. And some of my colleagues even drive every day up to 100 kilometers back and forward from home to work, and they're doing it for like years and years and years. And it's a lot of bicycle enthusiasts there, and just in a, you know, semi-professional level, you can say. They, for example, was competing at some point in university, and now it's just a, you know, everyday life and hobby, and they really enjoy the sport, nature, and driving the bike. And I think it's a big portion of the life for Danish people, and how they live and what they do in the free time. And I think the bike culture there is quite strong, especially the track bikes also there is quite strong. It's a lot of things around biking, and they spend a lot of money for the bikes also. So let's discuss at the moment important topics is the salaries. And I think most of you think that in Denmark salaries is higher than the rest of the Europe, and it's true. They higher, but in the same time, it's the same situation as you have in the Switzerland, for example. I think Denmark at the moment in the top list and is basically next after the towns in the Switzerland on expenses. And as you remember the numbers, what I mentioned for the apartments, it's quite easy. You can spend 2,000 euros and 2,500 euros for the apartment with the, simple payments for the electricity and internet, and up to 3,000 euros if you have at least kid and a little bit bigger family. And even if you live outside of the town in the middle of nowhere, you can basically save maybe 100 euros for the rent, but not a lot of money. And it's not like it's depreciating the price. Depends on the distance where you travel. So it doesn't really work like that. Maybe you will have a little bit bigger apartment for the same price, but the mean price will be more or less the same. And I think this is a huge downside. And for the corporations, you need to understand that they will try to rip you off horribly. In the initial discussions with the Demand Corporation, I think I was offered around 40,000 kronas gross. So it's basically crazy small salary, especially for Copenhagen. I know somebody in the comments will put like, yeah, I live for this type of salary, and basically it's okay for a normal Danish person and so on and so on. But keep it in mind that I'm not a normal Danish person. I'm also highly great and highly qualified engineer with the international experience and also with the unique abilities to do unique stuff. And it's a little bit different conversation that, for example, you get hired, you pass all the entrance kind of barriers, and you work in a country as a highly educated professional on a highly educated position where it's required to have ability to work there. And in the same time, you also get a salary which is less than, for example, the delivery guy or the taxi driver get there. Because I think the mean salary for the garbage guy who actually collect the garbage around 54,000 kronas. So it's quite nice and quite interesting to see this kind of a tendency that corporations and evil people in these corporations try to rip you off just because you have a huge line of people who don't really understand how much you need to pay for the rent, how much you need to pay for the food in Copenhagen. And most of the people, especially I saw it on my colleagues, they get stuck with this type of schemes because when you agree for this kind of a low salary, trust me, it's impossible to increase this salary for 20,000 to get a normal mean salary, at least for the garbage man in Copenhagen. But also keep it in mind, you have the statistics. And the statistics, for example, in my case, I was getting 54,000 kronas gross, and this was my negotiated price for my position, so compensation for my position, and also I get the phone compensation and just normal shitty laptop from Lenovo, which I never used. And I think this compensation back in the day was really great. I really like that. I have nothing against it. Unfortunately, the reality hits hard. And let's discuss this reality now. So first of all, you need to understand that all of the people around you, for example, at the time I was, I think, 35, and at 35 I was working with the people for whom it was the first working position. And it's for me so bizarre and so strange that I, with my 15 years of experience, have basically the same salary as the guy who actually just finished the master degree, and also with the people who have like low level of education, or they saying like, okay, I have a 10 years of experience on this particular factory and nothing more. So they older than me by 10 years, as you probably understand, and they only work on that factory, so they have basically zero experience in the industry. They don't really understand anything, and for them it's proud that they have a 10 years experience. And based on the statistics from the EDA, this is statistics that's collected from the union, and this claims that my salary should be around 75,000 kronas. And 75,000 kronas is a really great salary. If I will get it, I will be happy. Unfortunately, this is not possible for any type of immigrant. At least I don't know this type of people. And in Denmark also, it's quite kind of strict to discuss your compensations, which I think is crazy stupid. And it's also connected mostly for the corporations. People don't really strict discussing income, but the corporations usually push on you that, okay, do not discuss your income with your colleagues and things like that. It means that they not fair, and you can work with the person who getting like 40,000 euros, 40,000 kronas, with the person who getting 85,000 kronas, and you will sit in the same room and do exactly the same tasks. And only one difference, usually, as you probably understand, that one guy is Danish and he will work there up to the pension, and the second guy is a Russian guy who will work there up to end of the contract, or up to the, basically he will get promoted for the different company and search for different positions, just because you have not enough salary and you cannot really sustain the life in this company. For example, in Denmark, because salaries is quite close and the spending is quite close, the difference, for example, in 10,000 kronas gross is quite huge. So if you're getting in pure cash on hand 30,000 kronas or 40,000 kronas, it's a huge difference. Your lifestyle looks completely different. You can live in a different apartment. It will be much bigger. It will be in much nicer neighborhood, but the cost difference there is quite low. So it's basically 200 euros can get you from the shitty apartment to a really great apartment. But the trick here is that you cannot really afford in the normal spending to find this kind of a 200 euros difference. And this is also the downside of Denmark. I was not expecting that everything in Denmark, not only food, but also any type of bathroom stuff and the chemical supplies and cleaning supplies, everything for home will be twice more expensive and 2 times worse than in Germany. And I think the overall quality of stuff in Germany is much higher. Food is much better in supermarkets, not in the cooking, but in the supermarkets. And also, I think overall accessibility of the things is much better. And most of the time, you really like thinking that it doesn't really cost this much. On the opposite side, what I can say that Copenhagen is expensive. It's expensive town if you want to go out somewhere, but in the same time, it's not stupidly expensive. So it's expensive coffee there. If you want to go and drink some specialty coffee, simple filter coffee will cost you 40 kronas. It's around 6 euros. So thinking about that, you can say, okay, it's crazy. But in the same time, almost in all places, simple coffee, simple filter coffee, even in a hotel, it will be specialty coffee, specialty roasted in Copenhagen. And it also will be the guys who doing that, they compensated well and they have a normal lifestyle. And also baristas there, it's not like a cheap work for seasoned workers. You can have a profession of the barista or the roaster in the Copenhagen. It's a legit profession, and I think most of the people doesn't really think about that as a normal profession which is compatible with my profession, for example. And in Copenhagen it's quite real and it can happen. It's not such a high grade salaries, I think, there, but in the same time it's also quite a possibility that it is, because the gap between the salaries is not such a huge deal. And let's discuss the critical points about the Denmark and living in Denmark and actually why I left. And I think I will start with the thing that in my case, I need the whole family on my one salary and also have additional incomes to basically support somehow the system of living. And I'm not really spending a lot of money for going out or shopping or buying clothes and things like that. I live quite a frugal life, and also before Denmark, I was investing a lot. And this is funny, but this is only one money what I have left. And if you calculate all of the money what I kind of bring in Denmark, I basically worked there for 3 years for free. And I have no income which I get after this work. And basically all the money what I earned in Denmark, all of that spent in Denmark. And I cannot really say that I increase any type of kind of stocks or any type of physical goods or any type of even like money on my bank account. And additionally, what I can say that the medicine in Denmark also doesn't really exist. I was quite surprised that there is no professionals in the field of medicine there. Maybe in operations or high grade of medicine it exists, but general doctors, they even worse than in Germany. And in my case, I have really bad teeth and I have a huge complications with the doctors. And put it shortly, I went to the quite expensive dentist, and for 200 euros, he treated the wrong tooth in my mouth, which is getting more complicated on a tooth which was inflamed. And I was struggling to fix this problem for almost 1 year, and I have a quite hard complications on my health, and it was basically taking almost 1 year to get me back on track. It was quite a horrible experience, and it's not only with the one clinic and not only my experience, it's overall experience with the dentist around the Denmark. They work in the level of the dentists in like 90s in Russia. So it's so terrifying, horribly. And in none of the clinics in Denmark, you have a CT scanner, and almost none of the people there can treat the root canal, which is, I think, basic for most of the, professionals in the dentistry. And I'm not even talking about the microscope for the root canal and things like that, but it's additional topic and I discussed it before. But keep it in mind that this type of problems, and also if you have any problems with your pets, cats or dogs, trust me, it will be expensive. It will be not only expensive, it will be crazy expensive and on your expense. So usually you not think about this type of problems like health and like for example, health of your spouse or basically your wife or husband, or for health of your kids, dogs, cats, and whatever. But these things will drive you nuts, and you will spend crazy amount of money to solve this problem. And most of the time it's unsolvable in Denmark. In my case, I was flying off to the Budapest to actually treat my teeth. And to put it in comparison, I treated everything in my mouth for the price of 1 crown, which can be installed in Denmark. And trust me, I made a lot of procedures. And this is just a price comparison. And also the quality of the work there is just terrifyingly horrible. I'm not sure where they get the professionals, but overall professional level of any type of workers in Denmark is terrifyingly low. They have a high standards of living, but crazy low level of professionals across the industries, not only dentistry, not only medicine, but also plumbers, also construction workers, every type of basic ground workers. And after Germany, I think it's just a terrifyingly bad how they make buildings, and also how they provide the support for the buildings, how they make a renovation of the roads and things like that. Nevertheless, at least this is my honest opinion and how it works and how it looks like. And now let's talk about my life advice and my things, what I experience and what they teach me. Now I declined the position in Spain, and I declined it based on the simple calculations, what I just described to you. So I took into account the simple calculations. I calculated the gross salary and pure money, what I will get on hand, the mean value of the rent in the Barcelona, and the mean amount how much I spent on food in Europe, and the mean prices for simple things which I need to get, just clothes once per year, some simple ones from the H&M or Uniqlo or something like that. And you basically have the number which represents how long you need to work to fulfill this type of the relocation. Because if company doesn't really pay for your relocation, and in my case in Spain, for example, they was not paying for the relocation, they was not paying for the translation of the documents for their stupid government, which ask for millions of documents in Spanish, and also different types of apostilles and things like that. And also, additionally to that, I can say that nobody will pay for your tickets, nobody will pay for relocation your stuff, nobody will pay for your rent, nobody will pay for the deposit for the rent. And now they also have more or less the same prices of the rent, so it's more than 1.5 thousand euros per month for the simplest apartment, more or less outside of the Barcelona area. And they also asking about the 2 deposits and 1 basically payment on front. And I'm thinking it will be more or less the same, that nobody will give you back your deposits like in Copenhagen. And now let's discuss the exit trap. And I will finalize the whole situation with the exit trap. So if you calculate all of that, in Spain, for example, if my company or the startup will get bankrupt, or I want to change the position, or I will be fired, in all of these situations in 3 years, so I was basically working in Spain completely for free, 5 days per day, 10 hours per day, because I also need to travel to work, because you need to around 1 year to collect the money to compensate price of the relocation, and also compensate the price of the money which the owner of the apartment took from you, to have the same spare cash. And also you need to work more or less the same to sponsor the next relocation from the Spain to the new place. So basically for 3 years at some company, you worked only for shelter and for food and to compensate your endeavors of relocation. And the Spain doesn't really give you any advantage in future in terms of the documents. And I think in the modern times it will be much, much worse over the next period of years, and do not expect that the restrictions will be better. And I want to finalize this whole discussion also about the Denmark and the rules there. As you probably know, if you follow me on the LinkedIn, or if you follow me on Instagram or in the Telegram, I was fired from the position just because I had a new manager, and overall corporation became quite a nightmare and evil corporation, and incredibly toxic micromanagement. And basically my manager was horrifying idiots, and I think that at some point our conversation just end up that he said that me and my team doesn't really do microelectronics. And for me, it was basically final point of discussing anything with this man. And I just start laughing. And after that, I was fired with the HR. And I really like this experience. I think it's the first time when I get fired from the company and also with the corporation. And also when I get fired, which like with such a weak, pathetic people who even cannot handle anything properly. And it was thinking about that even in the moment, or like 10 minutes after that, or even now, it creates such a joy and fun that I even cannot describe it properly. It was such a fun and great experience. Nevertheless, it was like stressful. You feel a different mixture of emotions, but overall, this is such a great example of feeling strong about my boundaries, how people can talk with me as a professional, what people can do with me as a professional, and basically my boundaries with whom I want to work. And after this work, I think I decided concretely and finally that I don't really want to work with the idiots anymore. If your boss is an idiot, just say goodbye and leave. People usually, especially this type of people, and in this age, they doesn't change. They just, stupid corporate robots, and they end up really badly. Trust me, I had a lot of different works, and most of the time, best thing what they can do, they can stay in the same spot for next 10 years. And I think the overall thing that you will see after 10 years that these people is just not on your level anymore. Their opinion even not even remotely bother you anymore, and they just pathetic overall. And experience working in a corporation was quite nice in terms of the now I know how bad it can be and why, and what leads to this type of behavior, and in which work I should never work in my life. And because I was fired, and basically they give me special treatment because they was firing me. They have a 3 months of official paying salary and 1 additional month because they was firing me, which I was also not agreeing to anything. They just give it to me and thank them for that. Okay, I was not happy about all of the situation, and definitely it's not compensated overall troubles which this firing gives to me and my family. And for that, I hate the whole corporation overall, and especially my manager. And he's basically my personal enemy from now on. And usually my enemies end up really badly in life. And I think that Danish system in this case also quite terrible. As I said, you have 3 months usually when you get fired, and you have maybe in my case 1 additional month, and after that period your visa agency Siri will release a letter. And this letter I posted in my blog post on my website. You can read it. It's quite nice letter. In terms of the content of this letter. So basically it claims that you have no rights, you have no ability, you have no rights to work. Your wife doesn't really have a rights to work anymore. And only one thing what you can do, pack your stuff and goodbye from the European Union in 1 month. And keep it in mind that if you're not, anxious Russian and you have no experience with the shitty, horrible governments, you will sit in Denmark and hoping that you will find the work. But unfortunately, you know that it's impossible to find the work in Denmark. And I was immediately start thinking that's okay, we need to leave. And because you have a 3 months up front, you need to say to your basically rent company that you leaving the apartment, and you need to leave the apartment and 3 months before, and half of the months you need to be left from the apartment and pay the rest. And also in my case, I was selling stuff, cleaning the apartment, painting the walls cosmetically, closing the holes in the ceilings and things like this after drilling. And trust me, if you don't do that, they not only will take your money from the whole 3 months of deposit, which they did, and they will also take additional money for repair. And if you want to know how ridiculous this whole scheme is, that they basically taking up to 10,000 euros for polishing the floors, painting the walls in white, adjusting the kitchen furniture. I don't know what exactly it means, but in general, this is nothing, because everything was in a pristine, good condition, it's clean. And also they paying from your account, they taking twice cleaning after you and also cleaning after renovation in your apartment, which is just crazy ridiculous. But in the same time, you cannot do anything with it, and you have a zero rights to change anything, and this is just a mandatory scheme. And when you move in an apartment, I was thinking that, okay, I see this money last time in my life, and it's actually true. It's still painful, and in the same time I'm feeling that I'm a proud millionaire, and I can give someone basically Rolex to some kind of a manager kid in Denmark, and hopefully some kind of a kid of 12 years old buying Rolex in the central supermarket there. And probably some kid buying the first Rolex and 12 years old from the manager grandpa will be happy to seeing my money on his wrist. At least this is my mentality and how I think about that, and I can afford it. So it means I'm rich. And overall, I think this is a quite long conversation and quite mixed experience, I think, about the country. And I also want to finalize that you have the 1 month to leave the country, but in the same time, it's not the blue card. So basically, for applying for any different country, you need to reapply from scratch. And because you have a 1 month for termination, so you cannot really go in a country and apply for the visa there. Because if, for example, your visa for blue card will take up to 3 months, you don't really have a right to be in the country, and you getting in the gray territory. And additionally, you have the prescription from Denmark that you should leave the European Union, and you have no right for search for work in Denmark, which is also quite terrifying. Not you, not your wife, nobody. And just imagine, in my case, it's quite easy. It's me and my wife, but just imagine you have you, your wife, which found the work, and you living there for 3-5 years. Your kids get to school or children garden or something, found the friends, and at some point some idiotic manager fires you from the work. You cannot find the work, and all of your family of highly educated people which spend a shitload of money to relocate to Denmark should leave Denmark immediately. If you think about that from the philosophical point of view, it's quite interesting and quite fulfilling experience. And it's such a dramatic difference between what the people in Denmark think and what the government in Denmark do. And this direction in the no-go, and I really think that the Denmark will hit the incredible economical crisis in the next 3-5 years when the rest of the people like me left. And you already can see the articles about the people leaving in 2025, that most of the people who was fired from Novo Nordisk, around 6,000 people, they also left Denmark. And retention rate of the highly educated expats in Denmark dropping down, and you will get the financial crisis just because you have too many apartments, too expensive prices for them, and already nobody lives in them. And also your industry is offset to the China and also offset to Poland and not really built in Denmark. And most of the factories, like the factory what I worked in, it's there just because it's a policy that it's made in Denmark, and you have investor money and you can show that it's built in Denmark, but in reality 4/5 of the production actually located inside the Poland and in the different countries, where the cost of the workers is cheaper, and it's just a good-looking, small, old factory, and nobody want to spend money to renovating it in Denmark, and it doesn't really make sense. It's only political endeavor. So I think that's it. It's crazy long video. I'm not sure if I will release it at one video or several videos, but Anyway, thank you for watching and see you next time.